Hello, everyone. It's nice to see you all here. I'm Jack Benjamin. If you haven't met me before, I don't recognize a lot of faces here. So I'm one of the reporters at The Media Leader, and I'm here with Sue Todd.
Hello.
Hello, CEO of NABS. We're here to talk about well-being within the industry, of course. So I guess first question, how are you doing, Sue?
Oh, me personally?
Yeah,
I'm very good today, thanks for asking. Yeah, hardly anyone ever asks me, but thanks for checking in with me. Yeah, good today, thanks.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. How is the industry doing? Which hopefully just as well, but based off of what I've seen reported previously and what I've reported previously, perhaps it's not as cheerful of a story at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important that we base what we do in these conversations on data. I'm a real believer that we need to know exactly what's going on rather than just base it on the 30 people that we talk to personally, which has a value but isn't the be all and end all. And I think really importantly, the ad association's all-in census, which happened 2 years ago, is out in 2 weeks' time. So I think last time 16,000 people filled that in, and hopefully just as many did this time. So we'll get a real sense on all sorts of topics, including mental wellness, how the industry is. From my perspective, NABS does have its own data as well, so we do have some sense of what's going on out there. And I think the biggest change for us across 2022 was that calls to our support line, which is obviously one of our core frontline services, the number one reason why people called across last year, 40%, was for emotional support and emotional well-being. So although the second and third reason that people came to NABS last year, which was for redundancy advice and for financial advice around the cost of living and money concerns, fundamentally, even under those two issues, is also an element of people wanting emotional support and a sense of how they cope with what's been thrown at them from a personal and professional perspective. So the macro environment is still causing people a lot of concerns and anxiety. In Q1 this year, that was one of the biggest calls that we got to the advice line. Second was money, and third was actually conflict between managers and colleagues at work. So last time we did all in, I think 29% of the whole sample 2 years ago said they were feeling consistently and constantly anxious at work. We'll see in 3 weeks whether that figure's changed. Our sense is from the data that we get from last year that although part of what the increase is about is people feeling more open to talk about their mental wellness and mental health, but also that given the macro environment and what's been going on in our industry, which is a particularly, I think, fast industry. I think advertising does have its own particular penchant around these areas because we do try to embrace change very quickly and things get thrown at us very fast. So I think we do feel the pressure of trying to adapt and disrupt and change very quickly, and I think that has a bearing on people's sense of mental wellness. So, lots to do, and we've certainly made it a priority in terms of some of the products and services that we are bringing to market all the time.
I'll ask you about that in a little bit, but to sort of unpack some of the various challenges facing individuals, not just in this industry, but probably more broadly as well. You mentioned, yes, the cost of living crisis. It's been a topic that has been ongoing throughout the day. We previously, at The Media Leader, ran a column from Nick Manning, who's the founder of Manning Gottlieb OMD, and he argued that now might be the time to raise salaries. Now, I know that money doesn't buy happiness. That's the old adage. But is there something to increasing people's contentedness or lessening anxiety in terms of a lot of people in the industry just don't feel comfortable financially at the moment? Is there something that we should be looking at industry-wide?
I don't think anyone would question that the last couple of years have been a pressure for everyone in terms of finances. And as I said, money is the sort of second concern in terms of calls that we've had in from people. And the talks we've given and the financial wellbeing sessions we've run definitely show that demand for help in that area, both in terms of practical advice. In Q1 this year, our grants, in terms of the ones we issued to the industry, were up year on year significantly from Q1 2022. So there's no question that pressure exists. And I think lots of organisations over the last 12 months have given out one-off payments. I think there's been a lot of things written in Media Leader and others about one-off payments. I think the question of whether you can just do a pay rise for everyone is really tricky because although we probably all feel worse off than we all did 18 months ago, the honest reality is that hits some people much harder than others. And I think we have to be really honest about that. NABS was one of the organisations who gave out a sort of blanket payment last year to everybody at the same level, and that was very welcome. But the reality is, if you're going to look at pay, I think you have to do it on a more nuanced basis because there's definitely certain levels and certain part of our industry that will be feeling very vulnerable and the pressure of this particular economic situation harder than others. And I think that's the best way to tackle it. And I would ask everybody to have a look at that continuously, because there's no question it's driving a lot of pressure for people and is a key reason people come to us for both financial assistance, practical advice about debt, but also how they cope with it from a mental health and stress perspective.
Yeah, I will note that we reported back in, I think it was December of last year, that NABS's cost of living grants had to be suspended or paused because there was so much demand for them.
Yeah.
So I mean, it must be a huge issue.
Oh, totally. I mean, the reality is we could put every single piece of resource probably into cost of living grants and then do nothing else. But it isn't the only solution to some of the challenges that we all face. So I suppose if you take that parallel into individual organisations, they too could all, to a certain extent, just make the only solution they do to hand out pay to everybody. But I do think it's slightly more nuanced than that, and I think we have to target the parts of the industry that will be feeling the pressure the most. And that's let's be honest, that's not as big an issue for me as it is for some other people at different levels in our industry. So that for me is the fairest way to tackle this, to drill down to the places where the issue is the worst.
In terms of deeper issues that you mentioned earlier, emotional support that people feel they need, what can sort of be done to help in terms of that situation? Obviously, you're fielding lots of calls as a charity yourself, but in terms of the workplaces that people work within, what should they be looking at doing in order to better support individuals that could use more emotional support? Obviously, post-pandemic, so many things have changed. That includes work from home, hybrid models. People aren't necessarily even seeing each other face-to-face as much anymore.
Yeah.
What's your sort of stance on, well, I guess the work from home aspect, but how that connects to emotional support?
Yeah, okay. I mean, the work from home aspect is really interesting, isn't it? I mean, it's the biggest change to work in our lifetimes, and since the knowledge economy, if you want to call it that, which I guess we all work in, has been invented. So the impact of the balance between home and office, contact and working on your own, I think won't be known for decades, personally. However, I do know, and I know a lot of people know, that one of the things the pandemic did throw up for us is lots more data about the proof that social connection and the need for social connection was a key driver in terms of mental health. If you lose a lot of social connection and you go to the extreme of being, lonely, then we know that has a huge bearing on mental health. And last Mental Health Awareness Week, May last year, loneliness was the theme. And I know the government and many organisations have picked that up and are thinking about that. But on the other hand, if you're an introvert, if you've got a certain type of work, then how much social connection do you need? You need some, but do you need as much as me, who probably need, I get a lot of my energy from people and connection. So I don't think there is a one-size-fits-all, but we all do know from longitudinal happiness studies as well, that the thing that drives most people's sense of long-term happiness is social connection. So finding the right balance for that and having spaces where, from a work capacity, we can continuously talk about that, I think is really important. For me, it's reflection, safe spaces, it's a constant dialogue. I don't think any of us, I certainly don't, feel we've got it perfectly right yet in terms of the balance, and I do think it's nuanced and individual. But on the other hand, we've all got responsibility to our colleagues, to our teams, and to our companies, not just to our own self-care. So that balance between self-care, what I want, what works for me, I'm an introvert, I'm an extrovert, what type of work I do, what's good for my mental health, what I've got in terms of my lifestyle, picking up my kids, going to yoga, whatever, all of those things that really matter. But there's also a responsibility to our colleagues, to our teams, and then obviously to the organisation overall. So that balance is really hard to say one size fits all. And the more diverse we make our industry, which is a really good thing, including from more neurodivergent employees in our sector to cultural and social changes and differences to different age groups in our industry, the more diverse our industry is, the harder it will be to find one-size-all solutions to inclusion. So I think we've started the work on diversity, but I don't know if we've fully recognised how nuanced the conversation about what your culture needs to be like and how you work to maintain the healthiest environment for everyone to thrive in, how difficult that is to achieve when you've got so much difference in terms of what people want and need. So I think that journey is really interesting, and I think we're just at the beginning of it.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I'm much more of an introvert, so maybe I enjoy working from home sometimes, but at the same time, I definitely do miss some personal connection. That's why I like coming to events like this and getting face-to-face discussions. Something else that came up during the pandemic was this sort of labeling of certain employees or people in the broader workforce as essential. versus unessential, in the sense of you have to either go to work physically or you can just do everything that you need to do from home. Did that have any impact on how people view their jobs within media and advertising in general, in terms of, well, the government's told me that this job isn't necessarily essential, so am I going to question now the importance of my work to society? Does that conversation come up?
Oh, not with me, no, but it's quite interesting. I'll go away and have a think about that. I haven't actually heard anyone talk about that. I mean, we do know that purpose and having a sense of autonomy and mastery in terms of work really matters. And, I think that's important to everybody. But we are all on a continuum, aren't we, in terms of what we need to thrive and to feel like we're coping and doing our best work. So I think if the pandemic's done anything in that space, I think it's to help us all acknowledge that, mental wellness and being thriving at work and thriving at life is not just about the absence of a mental health disorder. I think that's how we probably, most of us felt before the last sort of 4 or 5 years. Well, if you're not diagnosed as a depressive, or you're not diagnosed with chronic anxiety, you haven't got some sort of chronic disorder, your mental health and mental wellness isn't a conversation. And I think whether you're labelled essential or non-essential, the reality is if you've got a job and your boss and manager clearly believe you have a value to the company, then we all deserve the conversation that says, let's look after our mental wellness the same way as we look after our physical wellness. That's not just about the absence of having a mental health disorder. That's about staying sort of mentally fit. And that's the sort of concept I think that NABS is trying to promote, that it is about prevention and promotion of these issues, as well as it is obviously where someone does have more of a chronic issue and needs really deep support, we're able to offer it to them.
I know you mentioned earlier that all solutions have to be a little tailored, but are there some sort of practical takeaways for people in the room to sort of say, I want to help, could just be an individual, let's say, or at least make myself known that I am available to help someone else in my company. What should people take away from NABS?
Well, I mean, a lot of businesses have got mental health first aiders, which I think is brilliant because it shows a commitment to the topic, and I would hope it follows with businesses creating safe spaces for conversations. Destigmatisation, having the right language and education are all part of how we change everything in society, and that mental wellness is no different within work and advertising. So I think the more we can get the language and more we can do that, the better. But I also think, really importantly, there's lots of data that's starting to say that managers are absolutely key to how you feel about your job and your mental wellness at work. I think there was a survey done by Harvard University, it was in Forbes a couple of months ago, that said 70% of people say their boss is key to their mental health at work. Same percentage as their partner. Every single other person in their life was lower. So your boss and your partner literally dictate how well you feel and how mentally stable and well you feel. That's really massive. So I think we say to business all the time, have a look at what you're doing for your managers in terms of their confidence and competence around these conversations, because they're key to spotting and being able to understand on the ground who might be struggling and who might not be, who might need to have this conversation internally. And the third thing I'd say is tell everybody about NABS, because we constantly find, I've worked in the industry for 25 years, I knew a bit about NABS, I've been in this job a year, and I cannot believe how often when people do come to us for help, they say, I cannot believe I didn't come earlier to this resource. So I think we're a bit hidden away and people don't realise what we can offer in terms of therapeutic interventions, massive training and development programme under NABS developed to support people and build their resilience and their capability to cope. But also, a massive part of what we do is connect different parts of the industry and help people find solutions to some of the challenges they're finding with each other. We get lots of feedback when people go to some of our group coaching or some of our L&D programs that one of the best things about it wasn't just learning the skills and increasing their capability and having a conversation. It was seeing that, if you're from an ad agency, someone from a media owner, and someone from a tech company is facing similar challenges to you, and that talking about it in those safe spaces is almost, in lots of cases, halfway to being able to solve the challenges for people. So connection is massive.
I know we only have a little bit of time left. Are there any questions in the room for Sue? Yep.
Hi.
Hi.
How do you navigate the void between, especially when you look at it through the lens of data, that that hidden place where nowadays, especially when you have more people who are from more marginalised backgrounds who don't want to share via a survey and actually will come to your hotline first, or like you said, have no idea that NABS exists. How, like, where does that exist for you, and like how you actually reach those people?
Well, I mean, one of the things we've been really committed to over the last 12 months is getting out there and telling more people about what we offer. Because the more we engage, the more we promote what we do, the more people we can help. And you're right, lots and lots of people, even though lots of companies have their own EIP programs, and I think there's been huge investment in trying to address and offer more solutions to these problems. The reality is, for some people, even if their HR department's amazing, their culture's fantastic, they want to be anonymous, they want to be confidential, they want to talk to someone who doesn't know them. And that's the space that NABS occupies. It occupies that impartial, confidential space. That's why, although we do have data, one of the things we don't do is share that data, apart from a very headline level, because some people don't want to tell us, and that's absolutely key. So we also work with some of the other, we're ally organisations to lots of other parts of the industry, from the AA and the IPA, but also to advertising and lots of the other MIFA. So it's really important that we stay connected to them, because although NABS is universal, and we have to make sure everyone in the industry knows we're there for them, the reality is there are certain groups that disproportionately are affected by mental health issues, and we need to make sure that everything we're developing in terms of services is, more everybody's aware of. So promoting it through other organisations is really key too, and that's what we're keen to do more of, part of what today's about.
Hi, Sue. Do you think sometimes in our industry, I have a husband who's a primary school teacher, I have a sister-in-law who's a consultant paediatrician. Do you think sometimes there's a reluctance in our industry? Does advertising really matter? So people sort of hold back from sharing their mental issues, health issues, whatever. And I wonder whether there's a bit of a reluctance sometimes.
I mean, maybe, yeah. I mean, I think, part of how people feel often when they have mental health challenges is, part of what goes often with anxiety and depression is a sense of, I don't deserve to feel like this. So I think it's not just in our industry. I think that's a prevalent feeling when often people feel that that's moved from just a bit of good stress into something more chronic, or chronic anxiety, or tipped into depression is a common factor, I think. Is it worth it? Do I deserve to feel like this? So I think we seem to be moving away from that a bit. I'm sure it still exists, and I'm sure certain age groups find that harder. We are definitely in a big cultural and social change to try and destigmatise and make those conversations more common. The reality is we're on a continuum, aren't we, all of us? And prevention and making sure we're looking after our mental wellness, for me, feels like the most important place for us all to be. And so often people only talk about things when it has become chronic, and trying to open up to talking about things before then, I think, is the key to solving a lot of these challenges.
All right, well, that's all the time that we have. Sue, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.